My name is Robert Souza, and if you haven't already heard or seen, I have no idea what I'm doing. But if you hang in there with us, we will try to encourage you with some advice from our experts, Brian Walker, the president of the AFI Group, and our senior investment manager, Edward Schuh, who is the founder of Inception Financial Services. The markets are closed for the week, and we're up for the second week in a row, but don't let it fool you, and we'll explain that in just a moment. Without question, we are all going through incredibly trying times, but through all the anxiety, all the confusion, the isolation, and the obsession of hunting down toilet paper, hand sanitizer, and masks, we wanted to take a moment to highlight a few stories of human kindness that have emerged from amongst the chaos. So let's go to John Krasinski's YouTube channel for the story.
Somehow the human spirit still found a way to break through and blow us all away. Nowhere was that seen more powerfully than in the heroism of the global healthcare community. Now, these men and women are working day in and day out. They are putting their own health on the lines. They are putting their own lives on the lines for complete and total strangers. And they're doing it without the need for so much as a thank you. Well, luckily the thank yous came anyway. And the heartfelt appreciation was seen on a global scale. In Spain, police lined the street outside their local hospital and flashed their lights and applauded their appreciation for their hospital staff. In London, an ICU nurse told her boyfriend she didn't believe there would be any clapping. She was wrong. Even out at sea, NATO sailors and staff applaud their healthcare heroes back home from their command centers, the decks of their ships, and even underwater. And the love and appreciation was felt right here at home in the US, whether from the balconies of lit up apartment buildings to the old-fashioned up-close and personal kind, where a man holds up a sign simply saying thank you to the hospital staff for saving his wife's life.
So we want to say a big thank you to all of the frontline medical workers who have been there, shown up to work every day and saving lives. But we are here to talk about finance. So let's invite our senior investment manager, Edward Schuh, to join us. We'll take a closer look at what's happening in the market, if we can pull it up. Now, Edward, before we begin talking about the markets this week, which we did end up for the second week.
Yes.
So I see up, you look like you're business professional. How about down?
So I am engaging in what we like to now call the business attire mullet, which is business up top, but of course we got the party down below. So the top does not match the bottom, my friend.
Well, we'll have to call Brian out on that too.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about the markets this week.
So, I mean, obviously any week that we end on a positive note is great. The difficult portion is to ask the question, are we really out of the woods yet? And I think we know we're not. We heard a lot of leading, C-level execs or senior VPs talk about how we hit the bottom, the stimulus is working, markets are normalizing. And, in my opinion, I think they're really just playing on the emotion of the market and trying to get consumer sentiment up to a point where they're going to feel comfortable investing in stocks again. But, when we see numbers from the retail division, retail consumer spending, and a lot of these guys were thinking that the influx in grocery and online spending would more than compensate for the losses elsewhere. And, a 20 to 30% increase in some of those areas is not going to completely offset the 20 to 50% losses that we're seeing in other areas. So while I'm often an optimist, I do think we have, recovery in sight. But how far down the road? I think it's still just too like we like to say in elections, right? It's not a winner or a loser. It's just too early to call at this point.
And be, between one source or another, I've heard this week 16 to 22 million people applying for unemployment, and estimates that we may hit as much as 30% unemployment in the country, and not to mention an estimated 19-20% delinquency on mortgages. I mean, those are some shocking numbers. Are we headed for a recession? And how long do people have to keep holding their breath before the economy opens back up?
So, I mean, those are staggering numbers. And honestly, Robert, I'm glad that you brought up the concept of recession, because it's a word that gets thrown around a lot, especially, given what we're going through in these unusual circumstances. But what I want to talk about is really what I feel like is a silver lining when we talk about recession. I mean, Robert, what's the last recession that you remember?
Yeah, 2008, 2009.
Yeah, so end of 2007, 2008, and 2009, and that's what's most prevalent in all of our memories. And what's bad about having that be what's most prevalent in all of our memories is that recession lasted almost 2.5 years. Now, what is a recession? A recession is essentially 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. So to generalize on that, it's basically 2 quarters where the economy moves in a negative direction. So basically 6 months. Now there's some other factors that they take into consideration before they call on a full-fledged recession. But if you take away the 2.5 years from 2007, 8, and 9, the next longest recession was the Great Depression, which was almost 10 years. The government really didn't do anything to try to correct that. Now, the average recession, excluding those, is only about 10 months, maybe a little bit longer. So recessions, if you consider that it's supposed to be 2 consecutive quarters or 6 months at least of negative GDP growth, the fact that it goes, on average like 10 or 11 months, actually isn't that bad. And then the subsequent recovery from that recession, ideally, if it's a short, shallow recession, like I think this will be, the recovery may be 6 months, a year, 2 years, unlike the very deep recession that we had in 7, 8, and 9, which took most investors anywhere from 4 to 6 years to get back to where they started. So to try to paint a silver line, do I think we're headed for a recession? I don't necessarily see how we're going to avoid it with the economic numbers that are coming out, but I don't want people to think that it's going to be one of these 2 to 3 year long recessions, because the economy was great going into this.
Well, to balance things out, I also want to point out that there are a lot of opportunities. They may not be the opportunities that people want, but there are jobs emerging from the market. Amazon's looking to hire 100,000. Walmart and Target and grocery stores are desperately going out and hiring. So again, it may not be an ideal job, but it may help families sustain themselves until they are able to reestablish their career.
And honestly, Robert, if the market goes down another 50%, I may be looking for a job at Amazon as well.
You and me both, buddy. I'd like to invite in our financial advisor and president, Brian Walker, to help us better understand the new laws in regards to the 401k. Hey, Brian.
Hey, guys. Hey, Eddie, if I knew you were going to talk so long, I might have gone and like changed my pants and got out of the business mullet, but gee whiz, give me a little heads up next time.
Yeah. You got it, Brian. Thank you for not sleeping through it, by the way.
I try. I had to slap myself a couple of times,
Well, good, Brian. Now we're going to put you on the spot. So can you help us? And I know we've talked about this in the last few Q&As, but can you explain? There's some confusion about the difference between using your 401k as an emergency fund via the loan or a distribution. Can you help us better understand the difference between the two and some of the things that come along with that?
Yeah, definitely. So now that the CARES Act is out, you know, a lot of people are trying to capitalize on some of the changes in the law. So what we have is the opportunity to take money out of our retirement plans, our 401ks, IRAs, and use that for emergency. And first and foremost, that would be our last option. Okay, so this money is set aside for retirement, so we don't want to go in there and mess up that plan, because most people have a long-term plan, right? And so we've set that in place. But if it's an absolute emergency, you need the money. So the government's kind of tried to loosen the reins a little bit on these 401k plans. And again, this is all determined also by your plan provider. So if or sponsor. So if your sponsor doesn't allow you to do this, then you can't do it. And one of the big changes was the amount that you could borrow. So initially it was 50,000. Now they are allowing you to borrow up to 100,000. And we have to remember that when you borrow that money, it is a loan against your own money. And so that money is coming out. So let's just say you borrow the 100,000. Well, that 100,000 is coming out of your investments. It's coming out of your 401k. And so over a period of time, roughly, let's say 5 years, you have to pay that back. And if you don't pay that back, whatever you didn't pay back, you have to pay taxes on. So when it comes out to you in the form of a loan, there's no tax implication. And technically you can take that money and do what you want with it. But that money's out of the market.
Ed, if we had to help people better understand their option, would you recommend the loan or the distribution?
So as far as the loan versus distribution, you know, the rules that they have is if you take the distribution, you can pay it back. If you can pay it back within 3 years, you don't have to pay taxes on it. It's like it never happened. If you take the distribution, you can spread the taxes over roughly 3 years as well. Now, the loan option, you can spread payments over essentially 5 years. And there will be interest on those payments, but that interest gets paid back to you. So if you can afford the payments that are going to come out of your paycheck as a result of needing that money, right? So I mean, that's a big if for a lot of people nowadays. If you can afford that payment to repay that loan coming out of your paycheck, the loan is always going to be the best option. Second option obviously would be to take the funds as a distribution, in which case you're going to have to pay taxes at least over 3 years, but you still have those 3 years to get that money back in there. And if you get that money back in, any taxes you paid will come to you as a credit.
Okay, and Brian, I've been hearing this week on the radio and television, and it's just bugging me, but this concept of not just taking the money or a distribution or a loan for emergency purposes, but we actually have companies out there advertising to take a loan and use it to invest. And in this particular case, real estate, of all things.
Stocks down? Don't want to liquidate? NRIA is making a special accommodation to help at this time. Under the new stimulus law, you can now borrow up to $100,000 without penalty against your 401k at low rates and invest. To help, NRIA is extending a high 10% monthly investor payout from our real estate-backed Class A buildings fund. Maintain your 401k stock position for the rebound and diversify into real estate and a 10% monthly cash flow. You're backed by a 14-year track record and prime income property with $750 million of new construction. You'll receive 10% steady cash flow, keep your stocks for the market upswing, and obtain returns with bonuses targeted at 18 to 21%. Use the new stimulus law to maintain your 401k stock upside and get 10% cash flow right now.
And I'm going to go Ed first, and then I'm going to let Brian finish up. But Ed, this idea that you can hold your stock positions because you're taking a loan against your 401k, help me understand how they got on the.
I'm smiling and kind of chuckling and laughing, but it is not funny. Every time I hear it, it makes me kind of like fume up inside. This concept that you can pull money, so you can take this loan. That loan is going to keep your stock positions in your 401k, and then you can pull that money out and go and invest it in real estate. It's ludicrous. When you take that money out, that money is coming out of the market. If you still have money in your 401k, okay, those are still in your stock positions. However, there's substantially less to grow with economic recovery. And then to take it out and put it into real estate when we're hearing about the potential for 18 to 20%, vacancy or people, not being able to live, not being able to afford their rents, and I think this is just the tip of the iceberg because people are out of work. They're furloughing some of the rent, or they're allowing people to defer the rents, which are still going to be due. So those are still going to be payments that are going to have to be made at some point. I would just want to see where things settle first.
Brian, I want to finish up with asking you about contributions. If families are able to keep contributing to their retirement accounts, how would you prioritize those contributions when you talk about?
Can you hear my dog?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, this is a dog eat dog world that we live in.
Yeah, that's awesome.
The joy of broadcasting from home. But Brian,
yeah, I'll answer the question.
Taxable accounts, tax deferred accounts, and your tax-free accounts. How would you prioritize contributions?
Yeah, so first and foremost, we got to handle our expenses, right? We got to have a place to live. We got to eat. We got to put clothes on our back. So, if we're able to take care of all those things and still have some money left over, first and foremost, we want to look at where's the most bang for our buck. And if we have a 401k plan and our employer is matching, we want to go for that because that's free money. Nothing wrong with free money in today's world, right? The government has plenty of it. They're passing it out like crazy. So we might as well go with the 401k first if it has a match. And then from there, because the government is passing out so much free money, well, where do they get that money from? They get it from us, the hardworking individuals that pay taxes, right? So if we're spending a lot of money as a nation, and we don't have the money to spend in the first place, the government just wrote a check for $2.2 trillion with zero money in the bank. I wish I could do that. But, they just did it. And so how are they going to get that money back? Well, taxes are going to have to go up. And so if that's the case, well, our next best option is the tax-free bucket. We talk about this all the time, the taxable, tax-deferred, and tax-free. Well, if I'm putting money away, I want that in an environment that the earnings are tax-free. What better place to take advantage of a recovery of the market than in that tax-free bucket? We have two options in this world. We can either get earnings that are taxable or earnings that are tax-free. And I don't know about you, but I'll take the tax-free earnings any day. So that would be my second option after that. So there, you got to look at these things and see what is the best long-term plan, and go from there.
Well, I really appreciate you guys breaking things down. It's so many things come into play when you're trying to make these decisions: taxes and interest rates and the different accounts and how it affects your Medicare and your Social Security. And I know you guys are teaching workshops on a regular basis, what now webinars. We're trying to figure that one out too. But I want to thank you guys for all the time you guys have spent on camera and sharing some of this information and helping people better understand. For those of you, if you want specific advice about your situation, Brian and Eddie, they're available to do a virtual meeting or a phone call to help you navigate this crazy time we're in. And if you need that, you can reach out at any time to us. The contact information will be on the screen at the end of our webinar. But I want to thank you guys today for joining us. And we'll look forward to seeing you next week, same time.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Thanks, Robert.
Thanks, Robert.